The business power play. Business parties were beyond boring. I have always despised them because it was always with the same crowd, with the same mindless chatter, and with the same greedy motives in mind. But I go every single time to make my mother happy, and if Jessica Harrison of all people were happy, then I could live a peaceful life. Thankfully, I was alone tonight as my parents were on vacation in the Maldives. I preferred it that way, with no companion, no irritants, and only fulfilling my duty in Harrison Co. in mind. I was walking around the events hall, which was decked out in the most luxurious gold decor you could imagine, when a hard body bumped into me and the drink they were holding spilled all over my immaculate white dress shirt and tuxedo jacket. "Damn it!" I exclaimed. "Would you please look where—" My exclamation was rudely interrupted when I looked up to the culprit and my brown eyes met those familiar cerulean orbs. "Seb?" I called out his name, just as he called out mine. "Jacob?" he echoed. It was Sebastian Sinclair, the heir of a rival company, Sinclair Incorporated, and the greatest love of my college years. "I'm so sorry, Jake. Your shirt and tux. Down. Let me get my assistant to get you a fresh pair right now." He apologized profusely, dabbing the mess on my clothing gently with a handkerchief. I could not help but feel butterflies because of his proximity. Even all these years, he still made me jittery. "It's all good," I laughed. "I have a spare one in my trunk. I'll have my assistant get it." With that, I instructed Hannah to retrieve my spare tux in my Tesla, and while waiting, Seb offered to accompany me. We were sitting on a couch outside one of the large powder rooms, catching up and babbling on about our silly little lives just like the old times. Nothing had changed. Seb was still as charming and handsome as I remembered. It had been years since we last spoke like this. Every time there were business conferences of some sort, I could only afford a longing glance before my mother would be dragging me as far from him as possible. "How's your company?" I asked while we continued to wait for Hannah's return. Seb smirked. "You asking that as a competitor or as an old friend?" He joked. We then laughed in unison, and as if on cue, Hannah arrived with my spare clothing. But I closed my eyes and cursed at the figure tailing her. It was the infamous Chloe Herbert. She was scantily dressed and looked like she would be going to a girls' night out instead of a formal business event. "Darling, what on earth happened to you and the tux I picked out for you?" she whined as soon as she got close to me. She then noticed Sebastian. "And who on earth are you?" Seb extended his hand and introduced himself, but Chloe left it hanging, eyeing him knowingly after hearing his last name. "Ah, so you're the one who crushed on my Jacob in college, as his mother recalls," she snarked, not bothering to shake his hands. "I'm Chloe Herbert, Jacob's girlfriend." I could not help but notice Sebastian's discomfort upon hearing this. Chloe and I had not been together for so long, so word has yet to spread about us. Our relationship status did not come up in our catch-up session prior to this either, so I could understand his shock. "I better be going," said Sebastian softly, his eyes looking watery. My heart ached at the sight, and I was too shell-shocked to say anything before he walked away. "Good thing I saved you from that man, darling. It's clear he looks at you as more than a friend. I won't even be surprised if he purposely spilled the drink just to talk to you," commented Chloe. She went on babbling about Seb, and I would have defended him for her slander if I had not been too distracted watching him walk away. Years later, and we still could not even hold a proper conversation without someone breaking us apart. Would life ever give me and Seb a break? Turned out life was indeed planning to give me a break in another way. A few days later, we were having family dinner in the Mayfield Manor. My parents had gotten back from vacation and even invited Chloe to dine with us, much to my annoyance. Chloe and my mother were catching up on the happenings in the business formal the week before when the topic of Sebastian Sinclair was brought up. "The decor was absolutely spot on as always, Mrs. Harrison. You have immaculate taste," complimented Chloe in her typical high-pitched tone voice. I could not help but roll my eyes. As someone whom I've heard talking crap about my mother's style to her friends, she sure could fake a compliment. "Thanks, dear Chloe," said my mother, pleased. "Oh, please, if only you knew the things Chloe said behind your back." "You're welcome, ma'am," Chloe replied. "Forgive me, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, but I could not help notice that your invitation list wasn't quite as refined as I had expected. Or did you really invite the Sinclairs to the formal?" She was either a bigger idiot than I had initially thought, or she was doing this on purpose to get me in trouble. Was the Cartier ring I had given her this week was not enough to keep her mouth shut? Immediately after this revelation, my parents' eyes flickered to mine and I looked at them with much guilt. I had indeed added the Sinclairs to the guest list at the last minute after my parents flew off, hoping to reunite with Sebastian without my mother's shackles. What? They are a distinguished family and it was an amazing chance to network. I defended myself. "Oh, I think that little gay boy Sebastian had more than networking in mind, dearest," Chloe said to me condescendingly. "Is his money not enough to get you guys to sleep with him, so he's coming after you?" My, oh my, what a scandal. That was my breaking point. Making jabs at me was one thing. Coming after Sab was another. With so much force, I bounded both of my fists on the dinner table as I stood up at once, wanting to walk away from this dining hall. "You have no right to speak about him like that. You don't know him," I shouted at Chloe. "Calm down, Jacob. Sit down and do not treat Chloe like that," my dad, Henry, berated. He was really defending this girl who had nothing nice to say about my family and really just stuck around for the material things I gave her? "How can you sit here and defend her? I'm your son. She's been cheating on me. She's nothing but a gold digger," I finally snapped. I was done covering up for Chloe. In my parents' eyes, she was the golden girl, fit for their little prince. But I saw her for what she truly was. A backstabbing, gold-digging girl who only wanted the prestige and benefits of being with me. She didn't love me. She loved my money. Chloe then proceeded to deny my claims, speaking to my parents as if she was begging them. "Stop," I asserted at once. "I've seen your boyfriend's texts. My assistant Hannah even saw you two leaving a hotel just last weekend." With that, I showed my parents my phone that bore the evidence against Chloe. "Get out," my dad said in his soft but authoritative voice. Chloe did not move and continued to lie despite the evidence against her appearing right in front of her eyes. "Get out," my dad boomed this time around, and Chloe Herbert was gone. A few weeks later, I finally mustered the courage to reach out to Sebastian. I invited him over to my condominium, which served as my sanctuary. There, my parents were not ordering me around. There, I was away from the judgmental eyes of the status quo. There, I could be whoever I wanted to be. I invited him for dinner, which was a long shot in my opinion, seeing as I did not even run after him after our skirmish with Chloe. I expected him to simply ignore my invite, but Seb, being Seb, was always forgiving and had the kindest heart. He showed up at my door at precisely 7 p.m., cleaned up and looking dapper in a suit. "I didn't think you'd show," I confessed. "How could I not?" he replied. I looked down and could not help but smile, and I suppose my grin was so infectious because gone was his passive facial expression. He was smiling too. "You're going to let me in or what?" As I prepared the last touches of the dining table, Seb made himself at home and looked around at the displays in my living room. "I never pegged you to be a Monet guy," he commented while gazing at one of the paintings on the wall. "I mean, he was your favorite," I commented, and he smiled. It was true. Even after my parents broke us apart after our graduation, I still kept subtle reminders of Sebastian in my home. Whether it be his favorite painting or the JNS engraved locket he had given me, I kept it all. During dinner, I finally explained to him the situation with Chloe. I felt extremely guilty, but sincerely apologized for my long overdue explanation to him. My mom wouldn't stop until I was with someone, you know. I guess it was sort of a reassurance that I wasn't going back to my old ways. I expounded, and by old ways, I meant frolicking with another man. "And their choice for you was Chloe?" Seb laughed. Finally understanding the dilemma I was in, I nodded, embarrassed. I kept her around because my mom was just incessantly going on about how I needed a girlfriend. I guess she pestered me all the time because she was scared I'd end up childless and no one will inherit all their riches, I said. Do you suppose that's why they broke us off? They think we'll do no good producing an heir? Questioned Seb, looking at me with so much gentleness that I just wanted to lean forward and kiss him. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe they just hated your family. He giggled at that joke, and he just looked so angelic that moment that I could not stop myself. I kissed him softly, and he kissed me back. Before we know it, we were hungrily devouring each other's mouths, having been devoid of displeasure for years. The locket, the paintings, my letters to you in college, you've kept them all, he observed, a bit short of breath from our kiss. Why? Because they never stopped loving you, I confessed. With that, he leaned in for another kiss, and that was how we spent the night, in each other's arms and our lips finding their way back home once again. It had been years and we still fit like a puzzle. We were like a lock and key, made for each other. That night was a wake-up call for me. I had let Seb go all those years ago to fulfill my parents' wishes. But in doing so, I also let go of my own happiness. And I have not been the same since. Now that I was pushing my 30s, it was time to put myself first, even if it meant going against my parents' will. That was why from that night on, I vowed to never let go of Sebastian Sinclair again. I was one lucky bastard to be given another chance by a soul so pure and kind. I was not going to waste this chance anymore, which is why I strive to wake up even earlier than my already crazy routine, just so I can make Seb breakfast and bring it to his place. I sometimes drove him to work, but we decided shortly after to part ways at his condominium, lest anybody saw us. Seb and I would then go to work and fulfill our duties as heirs to our family businesses. Him at Sinclair Inc. and me at Harrison Co. In the morning, we were dutiful, responsible, and took our place as important people in our offices. At night, we could just be ourselves in our own abodes, wrapped in each other's embrace and not worrying about what other people may think. That particular night, we decided to unwind in my crib. Seb had bought me pastries he personally baked, and I was thrilled. Since college, he had always been a big foodie and loved to spoil me with the dishes he made. I loved that he remained pure and carried on with his passion, despite the hustle and bustle of our corporate careers. "Feed me, love," I said as I pointed towards my mouth. "Me first," he exclaimed as he took a muffin and I devoured it. "It tastes so good." I found him so adorable and pinched his cheek. "Let me taste," I whispered before leaning in, and instead of taking a bite of the pastry, I kissed him. He got flustered and playfully hit me on the arm, although I knew deep down that he liked it. "You're right, it does taste good," I said, not referring to the pastry at all. "God, Jacob Harrison, you're such a flirt," yelled Seb, feigning anger. But he had a smile etched on his face and I knew he loved it. "And you love it," I retorted. He rolled his eyes and pulled me in for a cuddle as we watched Netflix on my large television. "Unfortunately," he said. With that, I kissed him on the forehead and absent-mindedly played with his hair. I led a stressful life and my only escape at this perilous point in my career is my relationship with Sebastian. He was my sanctuary in every day. He was the reason why I woke up motivated and filled with passion. He was my fuel, my anchor, my life. There was no way I was letting him go again. I made that mistake before and I regretted all the time we had lost. That was why whenever he slept over at my place, I always waited for him to drift to slumber before I also went to bed. I loved watching him sleep as he looked so at peace, away from all the problems our family brought. That was why whenever I felt he was extra worn from work, I make it a point to cook him his favorite food. I would also give him a massage every now and then, and he appreciated the gesture. These were small ways I showered him with love in an attempt for all our lost time. With my routine with Seb in place, I knew that there was impending doom lurking. Life was too good to be true, and it was probably the calm before the storm, and I was spot on. A few weeks later, my mother called me to Mayfield Manor for lunch. I knew instantly that this was not a good sign, as she only ever invited me over for one-on-one meals whenever I was in trouble. The last time we had such a conversation, she introduced Chloe to me and basically forced me to court that wretched woman. "Hi, Mom," I greeted as I entered the large dining hall. As expected, she looked stern and ready to rage. Part of me was terrified that Seb and I had been found out, but I was still hopeful that this lunch was only called for because I messed up at work. As I neared her, she threw a bunch of photos on the dining table, making them spread out like wildfire. "Explain," she said monotonously. They were pictures of me and Sebastian leaving my condominium at different instances. Some of the pictures boasted us going out of Sebastian's place instead. My fear had been realized. We had indeed been found out. "You had me followed? How surprisingly," I replied as I tried to downplay the incident. "I thought you had grown up. I thought you had come to your senses. Turns out, you were just as dumb as you were back in college, scurrying around as a gay couple. How dare you? You're going to put Harrison Co., a company your father and I built from the ground up, to shame," she bellowed. I looked at her with so much despise. "I'm nearing my 30s and you still can't accept me for who I am? What kind of a mother are you?" I confronted her. She stood up and I was reminded of how tall and dominating she was. It was like I was 17 again and she was, as she had always done, exerting her dominance on me. "Don't you dare question my parenting. I've done you a favor by steering you away from that boy when you were younger. I will not hesitate to do it again," she threatened, pointing a stern finger at me. "You didn't do me a favor. You made me miserable. You took away one of the only few good things in my life," I defended. "You will stay away from Sebastian Sinclair. It's final," she commanded. "I have plans set, my darling boy, and trust me when I say not only will I out that boyfriend of yours, but I will make sure his family also suffers. You don't want that, do you?" After that confrontation, I knew that my parents were still having me followed, so I asked Sebastian for space while I figure out my next plan. Despite my mother's threats, I was headstrong in fighting for my love with Seb this time around. I made the mistake of leaving him for my parents' wishes before, and that was not going to happen again. A week later, I was in Harrison's Co.'s main office for a board of director meeting, and I knew it was now or never. Being apart from Seb all week long felt all too familiar. He was devastated that we had to be apart, but I promised to finally resolve my parents' ultimatum once and for all. I was due to present a report that morning, but a plan that had been evolving in my mind finally came to fruition. I went into the meeting room and my parents greeted me amiably. My mother had been in a pleasant mood that week, likely under the impression that I was finally leaving Sebastian. Little did she know that that week apart from Sebastian, I used to garner evidence against them that I would now be presenting. I love my parents dearly, but I resented them for the views about my sexual orientation and their subtle homophobia over the years. I was also done being their little puppet. All these years, I tried my best to abide by their rules, thinking that fulfilling their latest order would finally satiate them and I could live my life freely. But to no avail. As I got more and more obedient, the more they took control of my own life. Until they literally dictated even my partner in life, Chloe. But being with Sebastian the last few months had rekindled my desire to live. I found a greater purpose after reconnecting with him. After this meeting, I would be free from my parents' shackles. Hannah helped me set up my laptop, but I took over once she had connected it to the projector. Instead of my monthly report file that was sitting on my desktop, I clicked evidence, and out came my mother's text messages the night after I went to the manor. Threats after threats of what she and my father would do to Seb and his family appeared on the screen at once, and I could hear gasps and sighs from the other board members. "Stop this tomfoolery at once, Jacob. I am ordering you," my father boomed. My mother started crying, and even this took me aback because that lady never cries. She was probably already trying to get the sympathy of the board. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the true Henry and Jessica Harrison. You may perceive them as the picture-perfect couple, but in reality, they condemn my sexuality. They cannot even accept me for who I am, let alone my relationship with another man. Stop right there, Jacob Alexis Harrison. I did not raise you to be a backstabbing son of a... Let him, said one of the older board members, which was met with nodding and sounds of approval from the rest. It is our duty to know who we are doing business with. Hear, hear, said another. They despise me. I am a gay man who loves another gay man. We love each other and we have since college. But my parents broke us apart then, and they want to do that now. They even intend to use this very company just to advance their agenda against my relationship. They want to use Harrison Co., a company that you distinguished board members have invested in, to destroy my relationship with Sebastian Sinclair, and subsequently tarnish Sinclair Inc. At this point, my mother was full-on sobbing, while the board was shaking their heads in disapproval and sighing in disappointment. The board will not condemn such act on your part, Jessica and Henry. This is unacceptable, and I personally will consider pulling my investments. As a part of a gay man too, I am beyond disappointed that you put on such a nice face for everyone, and yet, you cannot even spare your own son the respect he deserves. The other members came to my defense as well, condemning my parents' cruelty against me. The unity against them seemed to have gotten the better of them, as both my parents stormed out of the meeting room. I left the meeting room shortly after bidding the rest goodbye and thanking them for standing up for what was right. I was about to contact Seb as I strutted along the hallway when I felt a tap behind me. It was him. "What are you doing here?" I said as I kissed him square on the lips, no longer afraid of anyone's judgment. "You did it, didn't you?" he asked. "Did what?" I questioned back. "Fight for me, for our love." I nodded and he kissed me again, deeper this time around. Hannah sensed it. She may not speak much, but she cares for you deeply, Jake. She's been worried, and she said you haven't been yourself in the past week. She was also the one who had the idea of bringing me here, just in case you needed backup after the confrontation. Seb explained. I adored Hannah. She was a middle-aged woman who became my assistant the moment I graduated from college and started working. She had been more than that, though. Sometimes I felt like she played more of a mother to me than Jessica ever did. Good move from Hannah for inviting you then. So why did you show earlier if you thought I needed backup? I bantered. I knew you could do it by yourself, Seb winked. So want to tell my parents all about what happened over dinner? Wait, what? Your parents? They know? I asked, puzzled. They do. I feel like they knew all this time. They just waited for me to open up to them. And they accept you? They accept us, Seb affirmed. Who could have thought that the Sinclairs would embrace a Harrison among them? You see, over dinner, we have to discuss something. Don't make me nervous, love, I pleaded. I've had a rough morning as is. Seb laughed and ruffled my hair lovingly. Don't worry, it's my dad explaining the ins and outs of our new business venture. You see, Hannah said you might be through with Harrison Co. after this meeting, and I guess she's right. So I mentioned it to my dad, and he disclosed that he was planning to send me to Yorkshire to start up a new business. And? I asked, not quite sure where he was going. Well, I said I was down for it, but I was not going to be under the umbrella of Sinclair Inc. I wanted to start afresh with you, so I bought the business which we will be co-owners of, Harrison Co. and Sinclair Inc. no more. It's just us, you and me. Upon hearing this, I enveloped Sebastian in a bear hug before planting another kiss on his lips. Just you and me. The end. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force. And stay wholesome.